My name is Riley. I am 26 years old and a former Air Force cybersecurity officer who learned the hard way that blood does not always mean family. I drove 6 agonizing hours straight from my military base, my dress uniform pressed and ready in the back seat, just to attend my sister Chelsea's luxury wedding. But when I reached the grand oak doors of the country club, my parents Richard and Patricia physically blocked the entrance. My mother crossed her arms, her diamond bracelets clinking. Family members only. Riley. You can go sit in your car and watch the ceremony on the live stream. I did not cry. I simply looked at them, said, "Got it," and walked right back to my car. 2 hours into my drive home, I made a single phone call that would leave them crying over a $36,000 catering bill. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off toxic relatives who only wanted to use you. The drive back to the military base was quiet. The rhythmic hum of my tires on the highway was a stark contrast to the chaotic noise my family had always brought into my life. I kept replaying the scene at the country club entrance. I had not even made it to the vestibule. Patricia had stationed herself right by the valet stand, tracking my arrival like a hawk. When I pulled up in my modest sedan surrounded by imported luxury cars, the look of utter disdain on her face was painfully familiar. Richard, my father, stood right behind her, acting as her silent enforcer, just as he had done my entire life. What makes it truly pathetic is that 3 months ago, Patricia was the one who called me sobbing into the receiver. She begged me to request weekend leave from my commanding officer. She told me that Chelsea would be absolutely devastated if her only sister was not there to witness her marry Jamal, a high-powered financial advisor who my parents worshipped. I had known it was a manipulation tactic. They just wanted the aesthetic of a complete, perfect family for the wedding photos. But a small, foolish part of me hoped things had changed. I hoped that my years of military service, my deployments, and my quiet success running my own private tech consulting firm on the side had finally earned their respect. Instead, I got the door slammed in my face. Family members only. Those 3 words echoed in the confined space of my car. I was the scapegoat, the outsider who chose the military over their pretentious country club lifestyle, so I was unworthy of sitting at the reception table. But I was apparently worthy enough to secretly fund it. I connected my phone to the Bluetooth system on my dashboard and voice-dialed American Express. While the automated system verified my identity, I let my mind drift back to when I was 18 years old. I had just enlisted and received my first real paycheck. Patricia had convinced me to open a joint credit card account with her. She claimed it would help her rebuild her credit score after my father made some incredibly poor commercial real estate investments. Because I was young, naive, and desperate for her approval, I agreed. I became the primary cardholder and Patricia was added as an authorized user. Over the years, I monitored the account closely because my top secret security clearance depended on my financial stability. She kept the balances low, paying off her minor shopping trips. But in the weeks leading up to this wedding, I noticed a suspicious spike in activity. Small deposits from my parents' accounts were suddenly routing through that card to test the waters. I knew exactly what they were doing. The exclusive venue they chose for Chelsea required a massive final payment on the very day of the event. My parents were planning to use the pristine credit limit attached to my name to secure the 5-star catering, the top-shelf open bar, and the extravagant floral arrangements, hoping I would be too embarrassed to cause a scene at the wedding. The customer service representative finally came on the line. Her voice was cheerful, asking how she could assist me today. I kept my tone entirely professional, stripping away any trace of the anger that had been simmering in my chest. "Yes, I need to report an authorized user on my account," I said, clearly keeping my eyes locked on the highway ahead. "I would like to instantly revoke all purchasing privileges for Patricia. Please cancel her secondary card immediately and place a hard block on any pending transactions trying to process today." The representative typed away, the clicking of her keyboard echoing through my car speakers. "I can certainly process that for you, ma'am. Just to confirm, this will decline any transactions currently attempting to process under her specific card number. I smiled at the empty passenger seat. That is exactly what I want. Make the cancellation effective this very second. The representative confirmed the changes, and I thanked her before ending the call. The silence returned to the car, but this time it felt completely different. It felt like absolute freedom. I rolled down my window, letting the cool evening air rush in. Back at the country club, the cocktail hour would be starting soon. The venue manager would be walking up to the bridal suite with the final invoice. Patricia would confidently hand over the sleek platinum card, expecting the $36,000 charge to glide through effortlessly, backed by my hard-earned credit history. She had stood at those oak doors and told me I was not family. She had banished me to watch her golden child's perfect day through a tiny phone screen. Well, if I was not family, then I had absolutely no business financing their extravagant lifestyle. I tapped my fingers against the steering wheel to the beat of the radio, settling in for the remaining 4 hours of my drive. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the highway. I felt no guilt, no sorrow, and no regret. I simply felt eager. I knew the financial bomb I had just armed was ticking down to zero, and the explosion at that reception was going to be spectacular. 3 days later, I was sitting in the quiet sanctuary of my home office, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard of my primary terminal. The soft blue glow of 3 monitors illuminated the dark room, displaying lines of encrypted code and security audit logs for my private consulting firm. My military shift had ended hours ago, and I was deeply focused on securing a corporate network for a high-paying client. I was running penetration tests, looking for vulnerabilities, exploiting weak points in firewalls. It was ironic, really. My daily job was protecting systems from unauthorized breaches, yet my own parents had spent the last month trying to breach my personal finances. The silence in my house was perfect, predictable, and entirely under my control. Then my personal cell phone buzzed violently against the glass desk. The caller ID flashed Patricia. I let it ring 3 times, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my black coffee before sliding the answer icon. I did not even get the chance to say a standard hello. "Riley, what did you do?" Patricia shrieked, her voice so shrill it distorted the phone speaker. I pulled the device an inch away from my ear, maintaining my focus on the scrolling code on my center monitor. "You need to call American Express right this second and authorize the charge. The venue manager is standing right in front of me, Riley." The card declined. "He is threatening to hold the catering staff back and call the police for theft of services. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Half the guests are still in the grand ballroom waiting for the sparkler send-off, and they are staring at us like we are common criminals." I kept my eyes on my screens, casually running a diagnostic script. "I am sure that is a very embarrassing situation for you," I replied evenly. "But I am not sure why you are calling me about your financial problems on your daughter's wedding night." "Stop playing games with me!" Patricia screamed, the panic in her voice bordering on hysterical. "It is the platinum card, the one with your name on it." The manager ran it 3 times, and the fraud prevention system locked his merchant terminal. "Call the bank. Tell them you authorize the $36,000 for Chelsea's wedding right now so we can leave this place with our dignity intact." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, interlacing my fingers. "I did call the bank, Patricia. I called them 3 days ago while I was driving away from the country club. I reported the card compromised and removed your name as an authorized user." The line went dead silent for 2 agonizingly long seconds. When Patricia spoke again, her voice dropped into a vicious, trembling hiss. "You canceled the card. You canceled the card on your sister's wedding day." I corrected her without missing a single beat. "I canceled my card. The card I pay the annual fee for. The card attached to my credit score. And I did it right after you and Richard stood at the entrance of the venue and told me I was not family. Your exact words were that only family members were allowed inside. I am just respecting the strict boundaries you established. I do not pay for strangers' weddings." "You ungrateful little brat!" she snarled, the mask of the refined country club wife completely shattering into pieces. "After everything we have done for you, We put a roof over your head, we fed you, we raised you. You owe us for every sacrifice we made. We gave you the opportunity to go to a top-tier law school to make something of yourself, to be part of our society. Instead, you threw it all away to go play soldier in the dirt. You chose a disgraceful military path over your own family. You have humiliated us for years with your rebellious life choices, and now you are trying to ruin the most important day of your sister's life out of pure jealousy. The gaslighting was textbook Patricia, but it did not work on me anymore. I closed my audit logs and gave her my full attention. Let us get a few things straight, I said, my voice dropping to a low, commanding register that I used when briefing my commanders. Providing basic food and shelter to a child you chose to bring into the world is a legal requirement, not a financial debt I have to repay. Second, I did not choose a disgraceful path. I became a commissioned officer and a cybersecurity specialist with a top-secret clearance. I built my own life with my own money, while you and Richard have been playing pretend with your wealthy friends on maxed-out credit lines. I could hear frantic whispering in the background on her end. Richard's muffled voice sounded panicked, likely realizing that his facade of wealth was crumbling in front of the venue staff. I pressed my tactical advantage. You tried to secretly run a $36,000 charge on my account without my permission, hoping I would be too scared of family drama to contest it. That is textbook credit card fraud, Patricia. The only reason the police are not putting you in handcuffs right now is because I simply canceled your user status instead of reporting you for attempted grand larceny. You are a monster, Patricia sobbed frantically, trying to pivot to the victim role now that her intimidation tactics had failed. We do not have the liquid cash for this right now. All our money is tied up in complex investments. If you do not unlock that card, they are going to arrest your father. Then Richard should probably call his broker, I replied coldly, completely unfazed by her fake tears. Or maybe he can ask Jamal. Since Jamal is such a high-powered financial advisor who makes so much more money than a lowly military officer, surely he can cover his own wedding reception. Have him write a certified check. Before Patricia could formulate another pathetic lie, the sound of the phone fumbling echoed through the receiver. Someone else had violently snatched the device from her hands. Riley, you vindictive psycho! Chelsea's voice blasted through the speaker, vibrating with sheer entitlement. I could hear the echo of a cavernous room behind her, likely the airport terminal. We are literally at the gate, about to board our first-class flight to Bora Bora for our honeymoon, and my mother is calling me crying because the venue is threatening to sue us. Turn the card back on right now, or I swear to God I will make sure you never show your face in our hometown again. You are ruining my honeymoon. I listened to Chelsea hyperventilate through the phone, the airport boarding announcements playing softly behind her frantic breathing. I did not raise my voice. I did not match her chaotic energy. I simply let her exhaust herself. Chelsea, I said, making sure my articulation was razor sharp. Your honeymoon is a luxury vacation you chose to take. My credit line is a financial asset I chose to protect. The two have absolutely nothing to do with each other. If you and your new husband cannot afford the wedding you threw, you should not be boarding a first-class flight to Bora Bora. Before Chelsea could screech another insult, the phone was abruptly muffled. A heavy sigh crackled through the speaker, followed by the smooth, arrogant baritone of my new brother-in-law, Jamal. Let me handle this, he muttered to Chelsea before addressing me. Riley, let us drop the childish games right now. I am not Patricia, and I am not your sister. You cannot pull this kind of stunt with me on the line. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my glass desk. Hello, Jamal. Congratulations on the nuptials. He ignored my greeting. His tone was dripping with the condescension of a man who firmly believed his corporate title made him invincible. Listen to me very carefully, he commanded. As a senior wealth manager, I deal with financial disputes every single day. What you are doing right now is textbook financial sabotage. You established a legal pattern of payment by allowing Patricia to use that account for wedding expenses over the past 6 weeks. By maliciously freezing the funds at the exact moment of contract fulfillment, you are opening yourself up to severe civil liability. I raised an eyebrow at my computer monitor. A legal pattern of payment. That was a fascinatingly incorrect interpretation of credit card authorization. Jamal was trying to use financial buzzwords to intimidate me, assuming my military background meant I lacked corporate financial literacy. He had absolutely no idea that my private consulting firm handled cybersecurity for banking institutions that were 10 times larger than the boutique wealth management firm he worked for. Turn the card back on, Jamal ordered, his voice echoing slightly, as if he was pacing the airport terminal. If you do not authorize this $36,000 charge in the next 5 minutes, I will personally call the police and file a report against you for intentional financial sabotage and fraud. And let us be completely honest here, Riley. You are a junior officer in the Air Force. You cannot afford a legal battle with a top-tier financial advisor. If I bring a civil suit against you, your commanding officers will be notified. Your security clearance will be flagged. Do you really want to destroy your entire military career over a petty family grudge? The silence that followed his threat was heavy. He honestly thought he had checkmated me. He believed his tailored suit, his impressive job title, and his aggressive legal threats had backed me into a corner I could not escape. A genuine, effortless laugh escaped my lips. It started low and echoed through my quiet home office. I could not help it. The sheer arrogance of his threat was completely overshadowed by his profound ignorance of how banking security actually worked. Are you laughing at me? Jamal snapped, his smooth veneer cracking slightly. I am promising to drag you into civil court, and you think this is funny. I think you are incredibly bad at your job, Jamal, I replied, my voice dropping its polite tone and adopting the authoritative clip of a commanding officer. As a top-tier financial advisor, you should really brush up on your knowledge of federal banking regulations and merchant fraud prevention systems. What are you talking about? He demanded. Did Patricia tell you exactly why the card declined? I asked, pulling up the digital copy of my credit card statement on my secondary monitor, because it was not just a simple insufficient funds error. When Patricia handed my platinum card to the venue manager, he noticed the name Riley printed on the front. Since Patricia is obviously a 55-year-old woman, he asked for her identification to verify the authorized user status. Jamal went quiet. I continued driving the nail deeper. Patricia panicked. Instead of admitting she was not the primary cardholder, she tried to force the charge through. She handed the manager an expired secondary identification card and demanded he manually bypass the chip reader to run the $36,000 transaction. Do you know what happens when a merchant manually forces a 5-figure transaction on an account that was reported compromised 3 days prior? I could hear Jamal swallow hard through the phone. The airport background noise seemed to fade away as the reality of the situation finally pierced through his arrogant financial advisor ego. The restaurant merchant terminal triggered a Code 10 authorization request. I explained, breaking it down for him as if I were teaching a basic training course. The system completely locked down. The venue manager was legally obligated to call the primary account holder to verify the transaction. He called me Jamal 10 minutes ago. While Patricia was screaming at the catering staff, the manager was on the phone with me asking if I authorized a $36,000 charge. Jamal's voice lost all of its commanding resonance. It was suddenly thin and reedy. And what did you say? I told him the truth. I stated clearly. I told him I was 6 hours away. I told him I did not authorize the charge, and I told him the woman attempting to use the card was trying to commit credit fraud. Riley, you did not. Jamal breathed out, panic finally setting in. Oh, I absolutely did, I replied smoothly. You wanted to threaten me with the police, Jamal. Well, you do not have to bother calling them. The venue manager already did. The fraud department has already been notified about an unauthorized user attempting a $36,000 transaction at their establishment. Your new mother-in-law is currently trying to talk her way out of a felony charge in front of all your wedding guests. Have a great honeymoon. I pressed the red button on my screen, terminating the call immediately. I did not wait to hear him stutter or Chelsea scream. I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of my coffee. The first domino had officially fallen. The click of the disconnected call was the most satisfying sound I had heard all year. I set my phone face down on the glass desk and turned my attention back to my monitors. For the next 24 hours, I enjoyed absolute peace. I finished my penetration testing project, submitted the invoice to my corporate client, and even managed to get a full 8 hours of sleep. But I knew my family. I knew their egos could not handle a defeat of that magnitude without retaliating. They needed a scapegoat to explain the disaster at the wedding reception, and they needed to spin the narrative before the truth got out. The digital war started on a Tuesday evening. My phone, which had been blissfully silent, suddenly lit up with a notification from Facebook. Then another. Then 50 more in rapid succession. I did not open the app on my phone. Instead, I routed my connection through a secure VPN and opened a sandbox browser on my secondary monitor. I navigated to Patricia's public profile. There it was. A massive multi-paragraph post, complete with a carefully curated album of photos showing Chelsea crying in her ruined wedding dress and Patricia looking like a tragic martyr. The narrative they had fabricated was almost impressive in its pure delusion. According to Patricia, I had suffered a severe mental breakdown out of bitter jealousy over Chelsea's perfect relationship and glamorous lifestyle. She claimed that in a fit of unhinged rage, I had maliciously frozen the family accounts that I was supposedly managing intentionally, leaving them stranded with a massive bill right as the reception was ending. Chelsea had shared the post, adding her own dramatic commentary about how my toxic jealousy had traumatized her on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. They painted themselves as the loving, supportive family who had tried for years to help their troubled, military-obsessed daughter, only to be stabbed in the back. They did not mention the credit card fraud. They did not mention Jamal's arrogant threats. And they certainly did not mention that the money they were spending was entirely mine. Within an hour, the flying monkeys descended. The extended family and the gossiping neighbors from my parents' upscale homeowner association took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. My phone began vibrating non-stop as text messages flooded my screen. Aunt Barbara sent a massive paragraph calling me a sociopath who needed psychiatric help. Uncle Thomas left a scathing voicemail telling me I was a disgrace to the family name and that I should be court-martialed for elder abuse. Even the HOA president, a woman I had not spoken to since high school, sent a direct message expressing her deep disappointment in my complete lack of family values. They demanded I apologize. They demanded I pay the venue bill to make amends. They threw every guilt trip and insult they could muster trying to batter me into submission. It was a coordinated campaign of isolation and harassment designed to make me feel so outcast and hated that I would cave to their demands just to make the abuse stop. It was the exact same tactic Patricia had used on me when I was a teenager. But I was not a teenager anymore. I was a 26-year-old cybersecurity officer who specialized in digital forensics. I did not reply to a single text. I did not delete the voicemails. I did not block their numbers or argue with them in the Facebook comments. Doing any of that would only give them the reaction they were desperately seeking. Instead, I went to work. I opened a fresh encrypted directory on my local server. I wrote a custom Python script to automatically scrape every public and private post comment and tag related to their smear campaign. I captured the raw HTML data, the metadata, the timestamps, and the user IDs. I was not just taking screenshots. I was preserving forensic evidence that would hold up in a federal court. I documented every abusive text message, exporting them into a secure database. I transcribed the voicemails and saved the audio files. Every time Aunt Barbara called me a sociopath, every time Patricia claimed I was mentally unstable, every time Chelsea accused me of financial theft, they were handing me legally actionable instances of libel and defamation. In their arrogant attempt to destroy my reputation, they were meticulously digging their own legal graves. For 3 hours, I sat in the cool glow of my monitors, methodically building a watertight digital dossier against my own family. The sheer volume of evidence was staggering. They were so confident in their social standing and so dismissive of my intelligence that they left a digital paper trail a mile wide. They thought they were winning a war of public opinion. They had no idea I was preparing a scorched earth legal defense. I finalized the encryption on the dossier folder and leaned back, stretching my neck. The smear campaign was annoying, but it was just noise. As long as I had the data secured, their lies could not actually touch me. I reached for my coffee mug, ready to take a break and review the next phase of my plan. Then a heavy, authoritative knock echoed through the quiet of my house. It was not the polite tap of a delivery driver. It was 3 sharp, forceful strikes against the thick wood of my front door. The kind of knock that demanded immediate attention. I froze, my hand hovering over my mug. I glanced at the time. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night. No one from the base had any reason to visit my off-post housing at this hour, and my neighbors generally kept to themselves. I listened closely, hearing the faint hum of a large vehicle idling in my driveway. The heavy knock sounded again, rattling the front window panes. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My eyes locked on the digital feed from my security cameras displayed on the left monitor. Before I could even take a step toward the hallway, my cell phone vibrated across the glass desk. The screen illuminated the dark room, flashing Jamal's name. It was a calculated move. The timing was entirely too precise to be a coincidence. I looked back at the security feed, expecting to see him standing on my porch, but the camera only showed an unfamiliar man holding a thick manila envelope. Jamal was not at my door, but he clearly knew who was. I picked up the phone and accepted the call, pressing the device to my ear while I kept my eyes fixed on the live video feed. "Are you going to answer your door?" Riley Jamal asked. His voice was no longer frantic or panicked like it had been at the airport. It was smooth, slow, and dripping with an arrogant kind of confidence. He had spent the last few days regrouping, likely plotting with Patricia and Chelsea on how to completely dismantle my life. "I am a little busy at the moment," I replied calmly, walking slowly out of my office and down the hallway toward the front entrance. "Who exactly did you send to my house at 10 o'clock at night, Jamal?" "Just a messenger," he said with a soft, condescending chuckle. "But before you open that door and accept what he has to give you, I wanted to have a little chat. Just you and me, professional to professional." I stopped a few feet away from the heavy wooden door. "Go ahead," I said, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. "You see, Riley, I have spent the last 48 hours doing some heavy research." Jamal began, his tone shifting into the practiced cadence of a corporate negotiator who believed he held all the cards. "I know exactly how the military works. I know what they expect from their officers. And more importantly, I know exactly what happens when an officer fails to meet those expectations." I crossed my arms, staring at the brass deadbolt. "Enlighten me. You hold a top-secret security clearance, do you not?" he asked rhetorically. "That is a very delicate thing to maintain. The Department of Defense requires their personnel to be completely reliable, trustworthy, and of sound character. They have a zero-tolerance policy for anything that could be construed as leverage or instability." Jamal paused, clearly expecting me to interject out of fear. When I remained silent, he continued, his voice growing harder and more threatening. "I am currently drafting a formal comprehensive letter to your base commander and the Judge Advocate General Office. I am going to report you for severe financial instability and moral turpitude." The words hung in the air. Financial instability, moral turpitude. Those were not just random insults thrown around at a family dinner. Those were specific, highly damaging legal terms within the military justice system. "I am going to detail exactly how you maliciously froze a joint credit account intentionally, leaving your own family stranded with a massive debt on a weekend." Jamal continued, outlining his fabricated narrative. "I am going to explain how your erratic, vindictive behavior proves you are a financial liability and a psychological risk. When the JAG office reads my report, they will launch an immediate investigation. Your commanding officer will have no choice but to suspend your clearance while they look into your character." He was aiming right for the jugular. My top-secret clearance was not just a badge I wore on base. It was the absolute foundation of my entire livelihood. Without that clearance, I could not perform my duties as a cybersecurity officer. I would be grounded, stripped of my responsibilities, and potentially discharged. But more critically, my private consulting firm, the LLC, I had built from the ground up, relied entirely on my authorized status to bid on and manage lucrative government and corporate contracts. Losing my clearance meant losing my business, my income, and my reputation in the tech industry. It meant losing everything I had worked for since I was 18 years old. Jamal knew exactly what was at stake. He had targeted the one asset that gave me independence from my toxic family. Once that clearance is suspended, your career is over, Jamal said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You will be sitting behind a desk filing paperwork until they kick you out. And all of this goes away if you just do the right thing. Call the bank, pay the venue bill, issue a formal apology to Chelsea and your mother on Facebook, and I will tear up the letter. I will let you keep your little military job. He honestly thought he had me cornered. He thought the sheer terror of losing my career would force me to surrender, to bend the knee and beg for his mercy, just like everyone else in my family did when they were threatened. I took a deep, steadying breath. Jamal, I said, my voice cutting through his smug monologue like a serrated blade. Do you actually believe that a commanding officer is going to revoke a federal security clearance based on a complaint from a disgruntled brother-in-law who is upset that I refuse to pay for his wedding catering? You underestimate my influence, he snapped, his corporate composure faltering just a fraction. I am a licensed financial advisor. My word carries weight. They will investigate you. Let them, I replied coldly. Because when the JAG investigators pull my financial records, they will see an immaculate credit history. They will see that I legally closed an account that belonged to me. And then, Jamal, they will start looking into the person who filed the false report. They will start looking into your finances. What are you talking about? He demanded, a sudden edge of nervousness creeping into his tone. I am saying you should not throw stones when your own glass house is built on a very shaky foundation, I stated flatly. Go ahead and write your letter, Jamal. Send it certified mail. I look forward to reading it. I ended the call, cutting off whatever panicked response he was about to give. The heavy knock sounded at my door for the third time, louder and more insistent. I slipped my phone into my pocket, unbolted the lock, and pulled the heavy door open. Standing on my front porch under the harsh yellow glare of the security light was a man in a rumpled gray suit. He did not look like a standard courier. He looked tired, holding a thick manila envelope against his chest. Are you Riley? The man asked, his eyes darting to the clipboard in his left hand. I am, I replied, keeping my posture straight and my hands visible. The man stepped forward and extended the thick manila envelope toward me. You have been served, he said flatly, dropping the heavy packet of legal documents right into my hands before turning around and walking quickly back to his idling car. I watched the taillights of the courier car fade down the dark street until they completely disappeared around the corner. The heavy manila envelope felt cold and substantial in my hands. I stepped back inside my house, engaged the brass deadbolt, and walked slowly toward my kitchen island. I flipped on the overhead pendant lights, illuminating the thick stack of papers inside the envelope. I pulled them out, noting the crisp white pages stapled together with a stiff blue legal backing. At the very top, printed in bold black ink, were the words, Summons and Complaint, Civil Court of the State. The plaintiffs listed were Chelsea and Jamal. The defendant was me. I leaned against the cool granite counter and began to read through the document, absorbing every word of their fabricated narrative. I did not feel fear. I did not feel the sudden rush of cold panic that Jamal was undoubtedly banking on when he ordered the courier to my door. I just felt a deep, analytical curiosity taking over my mind. According to the official legal filing, my sister and her new husband were suing me for exactly $50,000. The primary causes of action listed were breach of verbal contract and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The story they had constructed for the civil court judge was nothing short of a creative writing exercise in pure fiction. The complaint alleged that I had made a firm, binding verbal agreement to finance the entirety of the wedding reception as a generous gift to the bride and groom. It claimed that I had maliciously and intentionally revoked the payment method at the exact moment the contract was being fulfilled, deliberately intending to cause severe emotional trauma, public humiliation, and reputational damage to the couple on their wedding day. They were demanding the $36,000 to cover the unpaid venue bill, plus an additional $14,000 in punitive damages for their supposed emotional suffering and public embarrassment. It was a classic shock and awe legal tactic. Jamal had clearly used his corporate connections to find a sleazy civil litigator willing to draft a highly threatening document on official law firm letterhead. He assumed that a 26-year-old military officer would be completely terrified by the sheer volume of legal jargon and the threat of a costly courtroom battle. He thought the heavy weight of a civil subpoena combined with his previous threat to contact the military JAG office would completely break my resolve. He expected me to call him sobbing within the hour, begging to settle out of court to save my top-secret security clearance and my military career. But Jamal had made a massive tactical error in his assessment of his opponent. He was treating me like a naive kid who had never read a legal contract in her life. He had absolutely no idea that my private cybersecurity firm regularly dealt with complex federal compliance laws, strict non-disclosure agreements, and high-stakes corporate litigation. I read legal jargon for breakfast, and I knew exactly how to spot a weak case. I tossed the subpoena onto the kitchen counter and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee from the pot. As I took a slow sip, my mind shifted away from the ridiculous lawsuit itself and focused instead on the strategy behind it. Something about this entire situation felt fundamentally wrong. The math simply did not add up. Jamal was a licensed high-level financial advisor. His entire career, his earning potential, and his professional standing depended on his pristine reputation and his strict adherence to regulatory guidelines. Filing a frivolous, highly publicized civil lawsuit against an active-duty military officer over a petty family dispute was an incredibly stupid move for someone in his position. It invited unnecessary regulatory scrutiny. If a judge threw the case out, or worse, sanctioned him for filing a baseless and malicious claim, he would be legally obligated to report that sanction to his corporate compliance department and to FINRA. It was a massive career-ending risk for a guy who was supposedly a top-tier wealth manager. So why was he doing it? Why go to such extreme aggressive lengths over a $36,000 catering bill that a wealthy man could easily pay off? A truly wealthy, successful financial advisor would simply pay the venue out of his own pocket, absorb the financial hit to save face, and permanently cut the toxic family member out of his life. He would not launch a frantic, desperate legal assault within 48 hours of his wedding day. The level of sheer aggression he was displaying did not match the crime he was accusing me of. It reeked of pure, unadulterated desperation. He was too confident, and yet he was pushing far too hard. That is when the realization hit me with absolute clarity. Jamal did not just want to punish me for ruining the wedding. He actually needed that $50,000. He needed it desperately enough to risk his own professional license to extort it from me, which meant the wealth, the luxury house, the sports cars, and the first-class flights to Bora Bora were all likely a massive house of cards. Financial advisors do not launch baseless lawsuits without a safety net unless they are already free-falling. I suspected they were hiding something much worse, something that went far beyond an unpaid wedding bill. I left the legal papers sitting next to my coffee mug and walked straight back into my home office. The cool blue glow of my monitors welcomed me back to my sanctuary. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and pulled my mechanical keyboard close. I closed out of the folder containing the evidence of their social media smear campaign and opened a new highly secure gateway on my primary screen. Through my private LLC, I maintained legal authorized access to several restricted financial audit databases and background checking services used exclusively for vetting high-level corporate clients. These were not the standard public record search engines you find on a basic internet browser. These were the deep-dive, heavily encrypted portals that banks and federal agencies use to track hidden assets, undisclosed liabilities, and detailed credit histories. I bypassed the standard firewalls and logged into the primary National Registry terminal using my dual authentication security tokens. The screen blinked green, granting me full administrative access. I typed in Jamal's full legal name, his date of birth, and the name of his current corporate firm. I was not just going to defend myself against his ridiculous lawsuit. I was going to tear his entire financial existence apart piece by piece and see exactly what kind of skeletons he was hiding in his designer closet. I pressed the enter key and watched the progress bar load, waiting for the truth to be exposed. The progress bar filled the center of my screen with a solid green line, followed by a soft chime from my computer speakers. The encrypted database unlocked, flooding my primary monitor with decades of highly sensitive financial history tied directly to Jamal. I leaned closer to the glass, my eyes scanning the endless rows of data. At first glance, his profile looked exactly like the pristine, successful image he projected to the world. High income, flawless credit score, zero missed payments on his luxury vehicles, and a substantial portfolio of managed assets. But I was not looking for what was visible on the surface. I was looking for the hidden architecture of his life. People who send threatening legal couriers in the middle of the night are terrified of something specific. I opened a secondary command window and ran a cross-referencing script directing the database to pull the origination documents for his largest liability, his primary residence. 14 months ago, Jamal and Chelsea had purchased a sprawling custom-built estate in a highly exclusive gated community. The purchase price was listed at exactly $750,000. I remembered Patricia bragging endlessly about the house, throwing a massive housewarming party, and making sure every single neighbor knew her golden child was living in a mansion. I clicked on the mortgage details, bypassing the public property tax records and drilling straight down into the federal loan underwriting files. The screen buffered for a fraction of a second before the primary loan agreement materialized. I scanned past the interest rates, the amortization schedule, and the escrow details. My eyes dropped to the signature section at the bottom of the digital document. There was Jamal's signature. There was Chelsea's signature. And right beneath them, listed as the primary financial guarantor, was a third signature line. It was digitally signed, authorized through an electronic verification portal. I stared at the name printed beneath the third line. My blood ran completely cold. The ambient hum of my computer fans seemed to fade into absolute silence. I blinked, convinced my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dark room. But the glowing white text on the screen did not change. The name printed on the legal mortgage document was mine. I immediately pulled my keyboard closer, my fingers striking the keys with a sudden rigid intensity. I abandoned Jamal's file entirely and opened a direct portal to my own comprehensive credit history. I bypassed the standard consumer alerts and requested a full unredacted federal audit of my Social Security number. Because I maintained a continuous credit freeze for military security purposes, pulling this level of data required me to input my biometric clearance. I pressed my thumb against the biometric scanner on my desk. The system verified my identity and unleashed a tidal wave of my own data across the monitors. I scrolled frantically past my active accounts, my military pay deposits, and the corporate holdings for my consulting firm. I went straight to the hard inquiries and open liabilities section. There it was, a massive glaring anomaly sitting right in the middle of my otherwise flawless financial record. 14 months ago, during a 3-week period when I was deployed overseas and completely off the grid, a hard credit inquiry had been processed using my exact legal name, my date of birth, and my Social Security number. Following that inquiry, a $750,000 mortgage was successfully underwritten and approved. The loan was currently active, drawing from my debt-to-income ratio to keep the terms favorable for the primary residence. My mind raced, piecing the timeline together with military precision. How could they possibly bypass the security questions? How did they get my personal identification details? And then the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Patricia. Before I enlisted in the Air Force and learned how to secure my digital identity, I lived in my parents' house. I kept my old tax returns, my high school employment tax forms, and my original birth certificate in a locked filing cabinet in my childhood bedroom. When I left for basic training, I took the essential documents with me, but I knew Patricia had kept copies. She always claimed she needed them for her own tax purposes, since I had been a dependent. I had trusted my mother. She had my social security number sitting in a manila folder in her home office for years. She had stolen my identity. 14 months ago, Jamal and Chelsea must have tried to buy that luxury house. But despite his high income, Jamal was clearly drowning in hidden debt, or his credit utilization was completely maxed out to maintain his fake wealthy lifestyle. They could not get approved for a $750,000 loan on their own. They needed a pristine credit score. They needed someone with zero debt and guaranteed federal income. They needed me. But they knew I would never agree to sign a mortgage for a sister who treated me like absolute garbage. So Patricia handed Jamal my social security number. And Jamal, a licensed financial advisor who knew exactly how to manipulate banking portals and bypass standard verification checks, fraudulently entered my information into the mortgage application. He used his corporate credentials to push the loan through underwriting while I was thousands of miles away serving my country. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together, forming a horrifying picture of utter betrayal. This was why Jamal had panicked so violently when I canceled the credit card at the wedding. This was why he threatened my military career on the phone. This was why he sent a courier to my house with a ridiculous $50,000 lawsuit tonight. He was not trying to punish me for the catering bill. He was trying to terrify me. He was trying to establish a narrative of financial instability and force me into a state of submission before I ever thought to check my own credit report. He knew that the moment I pulled my deep financial records to defend myself against his lawsuit, I would find the massive mortgage tied to my name. He was trying to bully the victim into silence before the victim even knew a crime had been committed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing mortgage document on my screen. The anger I felt was no longer a hot, simmering frustration over a ruined family dinner. It was a cold, calculating, and absolute fury. They had not just insulted me at a country club door. They had compromised my federal security clearance. They had jeopardized my business, my livelihood, and my entire future. I picked up the heavy legal subpoena they had just served me and tossed it into the trash can next to my desk. This was no longer a petty family drama over an unpaid wedding bill. This was felony identity theft. This was federal bank fraud. And I was going to burn their entire lives to the ground. I did not pick up my phone. I did not call Patricia to scream at her. I did not text Chelsea to demand an explanation. Engaging with them right now would only give them the opportunity to gaslight me, to cry fake tears, and to manipulate the situation into another twisted narrative where I was the villain. When you are dealing with toxic people who believe they are above the law, you do not give them the courtesy of a warning. You do not argue with them. You simply remove their power. I closed out of the personal credit dashboard and opened a fresh, secure browser window routed through a virtual private network. My first stop was the official website for the Federal Trade Commission. I navigated directly to the Identity Theft Reporting Portal. I filled out the comprehensive affidavit, meticulously detailing exactly how my social security number was compromised by my own mother. I uploaded the digital copy of the fraudulent mortgage document as evidence. I clicked Submit and waited for the system to generate my official FTC Identity Theft Report number. I saved it as a secure PDF file on my desktop. But the FTC was just the starting line. Identity theft to secure a $750,000 federal bank loan crossed state lines and utilized digital financial networks. That made it wire fraud and bank fraud. I opened a new tab and accessed the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center. I filed a secondary, highly detailed report listing Jamal and Patricia as the primary suspects in a coordinated conspiracy to commit federal bank fraud. I provided his corporate employment details, their home address, and the exact IP routing information I had pulled from the electronic signature verification on the loan. I submitted the claim to the federal authorities and saved that confirmation number right next to the FTC report. Federal agencies move slowly, but when they finally arrive, they bring a wrecking ball. I did not have the patience to wait for a federal agent to knock on Jamal's door. I wanted to dismantle his life tonight. I opened a blank text document and began drafting the most destructive email of my entire life. I addressed it directly to the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, commonly known as FINRA. Jamal loved to brag about his status as a top-tier financial advisor. He loved to flaunt his Series 7 and Series 66 licenses as proof of his superiority. What he conveniently forgot was that FINRA requires absolute, unquestionable ethical conduct from its licensed brokers. Any hint of fraud, especially personal financial fraud involving stolen identities, is grounds for an immediate permanent ban from the industry. In my email, I laid out the timeline of his actions with surgical precision. I explained how he utilized his professional knowledge of mortgage underwriting to bypass standard identity verification protocols, knowingly falsifying a federal loan application using the stolen credentials of an active duty military officer. I attached the FTC report, the FBI complaint number, and the unredacted mortgage documents. I did not stop there. I searched the corporate directory of the boutique wealth management firm where Jamal worked. I located the direct email address for their chief compliance officer. I forwarded the entire FINRA complaint package directly to his corporate inbox, marking it with high importance. In the subject line, I wrote urgent notice of employee fraud and impending federal investigation. I knew exactly how corporate compliance departments operated. When the chief compliance officer opened that email tomorrow morning, he would not call Jamal into his office for a friendly chat. He would immediately panic about corporate liability. He would lock Jamal out of the building, freeze his access to all client accounts, and suspend him without pay, pending a full internal audit. Jamal had threatened to call my commanding officer and ruin my career. Instead, I just dropped a nuclear bomb directly onto his desk. With his professional life successfully detonated, I turned my attention to his most prized possession, the luxury house. I accessed the direct portals for the three major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Because I had my official FTC identity theft affidavit in hand, I was legally authorized to bypass the standard consumer wait times. I placed a permanent maximum security hard freeze on my Social Security number. I flagged the $750,000 mortgage as a fraudulent account opened under false pretenses. Then I went straight to the source. I logged into the customer service portal for the specific bank that was currently servicing their mortgage. I submitted the fraud alert directly to their internal risk management department. I knew exactly what this would do. Banks rely on automated risk assessment algorithms to monitor large loans. The moment my hard freeze and fraud alert hit their system, the algorithm would trigger a massive red flag on Jamal's account. His escrow accounts would be frozen instantly. The funds set aside for his exorbitant property taxes and his premium homeowner insurance would be completely locked. The bank would immediately halt all automatic withdrawals and flag the mortgage for a comprehensive manual review. When the underwriters saw the conflicting identification data and the federal fraud report, they would enforce the acceleration clause in the mortgage contract. They would demand that Jamal provide immediate proof of identity for the third signer, or they would call the entire $750,000 loan due in full. He was going to lose the house. He was going to lose his job. He was going to lose everything he used to make himself feel superior to me. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair and let out a long, slow breath. The digital war was over. I had executed every single strike flawlessly. My screens glowed with the confirmation receipts of his impending doom. I reached out and picked up my cold cup of coffee, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over my dark office. Suddenly, the screen of my cell phone illuminated the glass desk. It began to vibrate wildly, the buzzing sound cutting through the quiet room. I glanced down at the caller ID. It was Jamal. He was calling me. The moment the credit bureaus processed my fraud alerts, his credit monitoring apps must have sent him an emergency notification. He knew something was wrong. The vibration stopped for a fraction of a second, and then the phone immediately started ringing again. He was frantic. He was panicking. I picked up the phone, looked at his name flashing on the screen, and simply turned the device face down on my desk. I let it ring. The vibration against the glass desk eventually stopped, leaving the room in total silence once again. I slept exceptionally well that night. The next morning, I woke up at 5 and began the methodical process of packing up my off-base house. My lease was expiring at the end of the month, and I had already finalized the paperwork to move into a much larger, highly secured property closer to my corporate clients. I spent the morning moving through the living room, carefully placing my books and military commendations into heavy-duty cardboard boxes. Every fold of tape, every label was executed with the precision I had learned in basic training. The physical labor was a welcome distraction, keeping my mind grounded after the digital warfare of the previous night. By noon, I was taping up the final box in the hallway when the motion sensor alert chimed from my central security hub. I set the tape dispenser down and walked over to the tablet mounted on the wall. The high-definition camera feed covering my driveway flickered to life. A massive black luxury SUV took the corner far too fast, the tires screeching slightly as it turned aggressively into my driveway. It jerked to a halt, parking diagonally across the concrete, blocking my modest sedan completely. The doors of the SUV flew open almost simultaneously. My entire family spilled out onto the driveway: Patricia, Richard, Chelsea, and Jamal. But they did not look like the polished, arrogant country club elites who had blocked my entry at the wedding venue just a few days prior. They looked absolutely frantic. Patricia had not bothered to style her hair, her designer blouse wrinkled and untucked. Chelsea was pacing the driveway, her face blotchy and red from crying. But Jamal was the most jarring sight. The man who had threatened me with such supreme confidence over the phone was completely disheveled. He was wearing sweatpants and a rumpled t-shirt, his posture radiating pure panic. He kept checking his phone, his hands shaking visibly on the high-resolution camera feed. They marched up my front walkway like a mob. They did not ring the doorbell. Richard stepped up to the heavy wooden door and began pounding his fist against it with a violent rhythmic intensity. The heavy thuds echoed through the empty hallway of my house, rattling the picture frames I had not yet packed. "Riley, open this door right now!" Richard bellowed, his voice muffled but furious through the thick wood. "We know you are in there. Your car is in the driveway. Open the door before I kick it down." I stood perfectly still in the hallway watching the live feed on the tablet. I did not feel a single spike of adrenaline. I just felt a cold, analytical detachment. They had come to my territory uninvited, attempting to use physical intimidation to undo the massive legal damage they had brought upon themselves. "Riley, this is not a game anymore!" Richard yelled, his fist slamming against the door again. "You need to get on the phone with the bank this second and tell them you made a mistake. You need to drop this fake fraud alert immediately. Do you have any idea what you have done? The bank locked their escrow account this morning. They are threatening to call the entire mortgage due." Jamal was locked out of his office by his compliance director. "You are going to make him lose his broker license over a petty misunderstanding." Patricia pushed her way to the front, leaning her face close to the door. Her voice was shrill and desperate. "Riley, please. You are destroying your sister's life. Jamal is facing a federal investigation. They are going to take their house away. You have to call the authorities and tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I had your permission to use your number. You owe us this. You are family. We can work this out, but you have to stop this investigation right now." I listened to their demands, marveling at their sheer delusion. Even now, facing federal wire fraud charges and the complete destruction of their financial facade, they still believed they could bully me into compliance. They still thought calling it a fake fraud alert and a petty misunderstanding would magically erase the digital paper trail of their felony. They wanted me to lie to federal investigators, to commit perjury just to save them from the consequences of their own actions. Jamal stepped up behind my father, his voice cracking with desperation. "Riley, listen to me. If FINRA revokes my license, I am finished. I will never work in finance again. You cannot do this to us. Open the door and let us talk. We will figure out a way to pay you back for the catering bill. We will give you the $36,000. Just call off the FBI." He was trying to bargain. He was trying to offer me the catering money, as if that would somehow negate the federal crime of identity theft he committed 14 months ago. He truly did not understand the gravity of the avalanche he had triggered. Federal agencies do not care about family apologies, and they certainly do not drop bank fraud investigations just because the victim gets a refund for a wedding bill. The pounding on the door intensified. Chelsea started screaming from the driveway, calling me every vile name she could think of, blaming me for ruining her life, her marriage, and her future. They were a chaotic, desperate mess, unraveling completely under the pressure of the trap I had sprung. I did not call the police immediately. I did not hide in my kitchen waiting for them to leave. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my cell phone, making sure the screen was recording and syncing directly to my secure cloud server. I took a deep, steadying breath, rolling my shoulders back into a rigid military posture. I walked directly up to the front entrance, unlocked the brass deadbolt with a loud click, and pushed the heavy wooden door open. I stepped out onto the porch, my phone in hand, completely calm as I looked down at the people who used to be my family. The midday sun beat down on the concrete, casting harsh shadows across their panicked faces. The moment I crossed the threshold, the yelling abruptly stopped. My sheer composure seemed to momentarily short-circuit their outrage. They were expecting me to be cowering behind the door or screaming back at them in equal hysterics. Instead, I stood at parade rest, my feet shoulder-width apart, my posture perfectly straight. Jamal was the first to break the silence. He pushed past my father, taking heavy, aggressive steps up the wooden stairs of my porch. He stopped less than 2 feet away from me, intentionally trying to use his height to intimidate me. He raised his right hand and pointed a trembling finger directly at my face. "You are going to get on your phone right now," he demanded, his voice thick with a mix of rage and sheer terror. "You are going to call Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. You are going to tell them that you made a massive mistake and that the fraud alert you filed was a complete misunderstanding." I did not blink. I did not step back. I kept my eyes locked directly on his. "And why would I do that, Jamal?" I asked, my voice barely above a conversational volume. "Because you are ruining my life." He spat, a drop of sweat rolling down his temple. "My compliance officer locked me out of the corporate network this morning. The bank is threatening to seize the house. Chelsea has not stopped crying for 6 hours. You are tearing this family apart over a petty grudge because you are bitter about the wedding. You need to fix your mistake right now before I lose my broker license." I let his words hang in the heavy air. He was still trying to frame this as my mistake. He was still trying to use guilt and family obligation to force me into compliance. I shifted my weight slightly, engaging the tactical interrogation techniques I had mastered during my intelligence training. The key to breaking a suspect is not to yell louder than them. It is to remain completely impassive, forcing them to fill the silence, asking pinpoint questions that dismantle their fabricated reality. "Let us clarify the situation, Jamal." I said, my tone as clinical as a surgeon. "You are demanding that I contact federal credit bureaus to retract a legally binding affidavit. You want me to tell them that the $750,000 mortgage attached to my Social Security number is legitimate?" "Yes," he snapped, waving his hand frantically. "Tell them it was a joint family investment. Tell them whatever they need to hear to unlock my escrow account and get FINRA off my back." I tilted my head slightly. But why would I authorize a mortgage I never signed, Jamal? The question was simple, but it acted like a tripwire. Jamal hesitated, his jaw clenching. He looked back at Patricia, who was wringing her hands at the bottom of the porch stairs. My mother refused to make eye contact with me, staring fixedly at the driveway. You know why Jamal stammered, his corporate confidence rapidly evaporating. "We talked about this. It was a family arrangement." "We never talked about this." I corrected him instantly, leaving no room for his gaslighting. "I have been stationed at a military base for the last 3 years. I have not lived in the same zip code as you or Chelsea since you started dating. I never signed a single piece of paper authorizing a real estate purchase. So I will ask you again, Jamal. How exactly did my name, my date of birth, and my Social Security number end up on your federal loan application 14 months ago while I was deployed overseas?" Richard stepped forward, placing a hand on the porch railing. Wryly enough with the interrogation, my father barked, trying to regain control of the narrative. Your mother handled the paperwork. We did what we had to do to make sure Chelsea had a secure future. You were not using your credit anyway. You sit on a military base all day. We are family and families help each other. Each. I ignored my father completely, keeping my eyes fixed like lasers on Jamal. Did my father forge the electronic signature, Jamal? I asked, my voice perfectly steady. Or did you do it? You are the licensed financial advisor. You know exactly how the underwriting portals work. Did you sit at your corporate desk and input stolen identification credentials to secure a loan you could not afford on your own? I did not steal anything, Jamal yelled, his voice cracking as the pressure finally broke him. The veins in his neck were bulging against his skin. His hands balled into tight fists at his sides. He was cornered, humiliated in front of his new wife, and watching his entire successful facade crumble to dust. Then explain it to me, I commanded softly. Because your mother gave us the number, he screamed, his voice echoing off the neighboring houses. He threw his arms out wildly, pointing down at Patricia. She gave me your tax forms. We needed the debt-to-income ratio to get approved for the luxury tier. You had zero debt and a guaranteed government salary. We could not close on the house without a pristine co-signer. You are family, Riley. You owe us. You owe your sister. We just borrowed your credit score. We were making the payments. It is not a crime if we are paying the mortgage. The silence that followed his outburst was absolute. Chelsea stopped pacing. Richard froze with his hand on the railing. Patricia covered her mouth with trembling fingers, realizing exactly what her golden son-in-law had just done. In his desperate attempt to justify his actions and shift the blame, Jamal had just confessed to the entire conspiracy at the top of his lungs. He had admitted to receiving the stolen documents. He had admitted to using my identity to bypass financial requirements. And he had admitted to doing it deliberately to secure a federal loan. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply took a half step back and looked up at the ceiling of my porch. Nestled discreetly in the corner of the wooden eaves pointing directly down at the stairs was my high-definition Ring security camera. The small blue light on the device was pulsing steadily, indicating that it was actively recording both crystal-clear video and high-fidelity audio directly to my secure cloud server. I looked back down at Jamal. The color had completely drained from his face as his eyes followed my gaze up to the camera lens. He suddenly looked very small, like a man who had just stepped off a cliff and finally realized there was no safety net waiting at the bottom. Thank you for the confession, Jamal, I said quietly. Jamal's eyes stayed glued to the small glowing ring of the camera mounted above my head. The reality of his situation crashed over him like a physical weight. He had just admitted to a federal financial crime on high-definition video with crystal-clear audio. He stumbled backward, bumping into my father. Richard looked from Jamal to the camera and then finally down to the cell phone still gripped firmly in my right hand. His face morphed from confusion into a deep, furious shade of red. In his outdated mind, he still believed he could fix this entire disaster by using brute force. He thought the phone in my hand was the only thing holding the recording. He did not understand cloud servers' encrypted data synchronization or the fact that the evidence was already light years out of his reach. "Give me the phone, Riley!" Richard growled, pushing past Jamal and aggressively closing the distance between us. "You are going to delete that video right now and you are going to call the bank. We are not playing these games anymore." I kept my posture relaxed but highly alert. The video is already uploaded to a secure off-site military server, I explained, keeping my voice utterly devoid of emotion. Breaking my phone will not change the fact that Jamal just confessed to identity theft. It will only add the destruction of private property to the long list of charges this family is facing today. Richard did not listen. He had spent his entire life ruling our household through sheer physical intimidation and volume. When he yelled, people listened. When he stomped his feet, my mother and sister fell into line. He honestly believed that the rank on my uniform meant absolutely nothing when I was standing under a roof he felt he had authority over. He thought I was still the quiet teenager who used to shrink away when he raised his voice. He let out a frustrated guttural roar and lunged forward, throwing his entire body weight toward me. His heavy hands reached out violently, grasping for the phone. He expected me to flinch. He expected me to step back, cower, and hand over the device. Instead, my military training took over instantly. Close quarters combat is not about anger or throwing wild punches. It is a calculated manipulation of anatomy, physics, and leverage. As Richard crossed the threshold, his hands reaching out like meat hooks, I dropped my center of gravity. I smoothly pivoted my lead foot, stepping just inches off his center line. I brought my left arm up, parrying his right wrist with a firm block. In the exact same fluid motion, I stepped deep into his guard, wrapped my hand around his elbow joint, and applied a sharp downward torque. I did not strike him. I did not throw a single punch. I simply used his own aggressive forward momentum completely against him, guiding his mass forcefully past me. Richard lost his balance instantly. He stumbled hard over his own clumsy feet, pitching forward and crashing heavily into the thick wooden railing of the porch. The wood groaned loudly under his weight. He gasped for air, clutching his twisted shoulder, completely shocked by how effortlessly I had neutralized him without even breaking a sweat. Patricia shrieked, rushing up the steps to grab his arm. "Richard, are you okay?" She spun around to face me, her eyes wide with manufactured terror. "You assaulted your own father. You are completely unhinged, Riley. We are calling the police right now and having you arrested for aggravated assault." Chelsea pulled her phone out of her designer purse, her fingers shaking wildly as she tried to unlock the screen. "You are going to jail, Riley," she screamed from the driveway. "You are insane." I smoothly stepped back to the center of the porch, creating a safe, tactical distance. I slipped my phone into my pocket and crossed my arms behind my back, assuming a parade rest position. "You do not need to call the police, Chelsea," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through their chaotic shouting. "I already did." They all froze. Jamal looked up, his chest heaving, his face pale and slick with sweat. "What did you do?" I reached into my left pocket and pulled out a small black fob. It was a tactical panic button linked directly to my home security system and integrated directly with local law enforcement dispatch. I pressed this the exact second your vehicle illegally blocked my driveway and 4 hostile individuals swarmed my front door. As a commissioned officer holding a top-secret security clearance, maintaining the physical security of my off-base residence is not just a personal preference. It is a strict Department of Defense mandate. When a coordinated group approaches my residence aggressively, I do not wait to see if you want to talk. I initiate a distress signal. "You called the cops on your own family!" Patricia gasped, her voice trembling as she clutched Richard's jacket. "Over a misunderstanding, over felony identity theft, attempted extortion, and now an attempted physical assault," I corrected her sharply. "And since I live in off-base housing designated specifically for military personnel, the local dispatch automatically notifies the military police. You are not just dealing with the local precinct anymore." As if on cue, the distant wail of sirens pierced the quiet afternoon air. The sound was a harsh, jarring contrast to the perfectly manicured lawns and peaceful atmosphere of the suburban neighborhood. The sirens grew rapidly louder, echoing off the brick facades of the surrounding houses. I could see the blinds of the houses across the street twitching. Neighbors were stepping out onto their front porches, drawn by the commotion and the undeniable noise of incoming law enforcement. The immaculate social standing Patricia and Richard cared so deeply about was disintegrating right in front of their eyes. Jamal spun around, looking frantically down the street. "No, no, no," he muttered, running both hands over his head. "This cannot be happening." Chelsea dropped her phone on the concrete driveway. The screen shattered, but she did not even notice. She grabbed Jamal's arm, pulling on his shirt. "Tell them we were just visiting. Tell them it is a family dispute and we are leaving." Richard pushed himself off the railing, his aggressive bravado completely gone. He finally realized the sheer magnitude of his mistake. He had lunged at a trained military officer on her own property, and it was all captured on high-definition video. "Riley, please, he begged, his voice cracking. "Tell them to turn around. Tell them we are leaving right now and we will never bother you again." I stayed completely silent, watching the flashing red and blue strobe lights reflect off the windows of the houses down the street. The first vehicle to turn the corner was a standard local police cruiser. It took the turn fast, the tires gripping the asphalt tightly. Right behind it was a heavy-duty dark blue SUV with military police stenciled across the side in stark white lettering. The two vehicles swerved to a halt right behind Jamal's luxury SUV, parking at strategic angles to create a tactical blockade. Jamal was boxed in. There was no escape. The sirens cut off abruptly, leaving only the sound of static from the police radios and the heavy idling of the powerful engines. The flashing strobe lights painted the driveway in chaotic colors, illuminating the absolute terror on Chelsea's face. The doors of the cruisers opened in perfect synchronization. Two local police officers stepped out of the first car, their expressions hard and unreadable. From the dark SUV, two military police officers emerged wearing tactical gear, their heavy boots hitting the pavement with a solid thud. They took one look at the chaotic scene on the driveway. They saw my father breathing heavily near the porch, Jamal pacing erratically, Chelsea crying over a broken phone, and me standing at the elevated tactical position with perfect military bearing. None of them asked for an explanation. None of them approached with friendly smiles. Every single officer stepped out of their vehicle with their hands resting firmly on the grips of their holstered weapons. The heavy silence lasted only a fraction of a second before Patricia completely threw herself into her practiced victim routine. She stumbled down the wooden porch steps, waving her arms frantically at the approaching officers. "Help us!" she shrieked, forcing dramatic, breathless sobs that carried down the entire street. My daughter has completely lost her mind. She just violently attacked my husband without any provocation. She is having a severe mental breakdown, and she is trying to destroy our family. Please, you have to arrest her before she hurts someone else. Richard caught on to his wife's strategy immediately. He slumped against the wooden railing, clutching his shoulder and groaning loudly to emphasize his supposed injuries. "She just snapped," Officer Richard called out, playing the role of the battered elderly father perfectly. "We just came over to talk sense into her, and she used her military training against me." The local police officers did not blindly accept the theatrical performance. They fanned out quickly, establishing a secure perimeter around the driveway. One of the local officers pointed a firm finger at my parents. "Stay exactly where you are," he commanded sharply, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "Keep your hands visible. Nobody moves until we figure out what is going on here." While the local police secured the perimeter, the two military police officers bypassed my hysterical mother and walked directly toward the porch. They instantly recognized my parade rest stance, my calm demeanor, and the tactical positioning I had maintained. They stopped at the base of the stairs, their eyes scanning the chaotic scene before looking up at me. "Ma'am, are you the homeowner who initiated the distress signal?" The lead military police officer asked, his tone strictly professional. "I am," I replied clearly, projecting my voice, so every officer on the scene could hear me over my sister's crying. "I am an active-duty cybersecurity officer holding a top-secret security clearance. I initiated the tactical panic button because these four individuals illegally barricaded my driveway, attempted to extort me to cover up a federal financial crime, and subsequently attempted to physically assault me on my own property." Patricia gasped loudly from the driveway. "She is lying. She is making it all up because she is jealous of her sister's wedding." The military police officer ignored her completely, keeping his focus locked firmly on me. "Do you have any proof of these allegations?" I stepped back into the doorway and reached for the tablet mounted on the wall. I disconnected it from the charging dock and walked back to the edge of the porch. "I have high-definition video and audio evidence captured less than 3 minutes ago," I stated, holding the tablet out to the lead officer. The military officer stepped up onto the porch and took the device. The second military officer joined him, along with one of the local precinct cops. I tapped the screen, bringing up the secure cloud interface, and hit play on the most recent file. The volume was turned all the way up. The crisp, high-fidelity audio played flawlessly. Jamal's arrogant shouting voice filled the quiet neighborhood once again. The officers watched the screen intently as the digital version of Jamal pointed his finger and demanded I drop the fraud alert. Then came the tactical interrogation. The officers heard me ask exactly how my social security number ended up on his federal mortgage application. Then came the confession. Because your mother gave us the number, the digital Jamal screamed from the tablet speakers. We needed the debt-to-income ratio to get approved for the luxury tier. You had zero debt and a guaranteed government salary. We could not close on the house without a pristine co-signer. The local police officer let out a low whistle, shaking his head in disbelief. The video continued seamlessly. It showed me pointing to the security camera, followed immediately by Richard lunging forward with his hands outstretched violently, attempting to grab my personal property. It showed my textbook defensive parry, utilizing minimum necessary force to neutralize the threat, resulting in Richard crashing into the railing entirely due to his own aggressive forward momentum. The video ended. The silence that fell over the driveway this time was absolutely suffocating. The lead military police officer handed the tablet back to me. His expression had hardened into a mask of pure professional anger. Attempting to assault an active duty officer is a serious offense, he said quietly to me. But identity theft and wire fraud against cleared personnel elevates this entirely to federal jurisdiction. He turned around and walked down the steps, pulling his radio from his tactical vest. Dispatch, we have a confirmed 1015. Send a federal liaison to the local precinct. We have a felony identity theft and bank fraud suspect ready for immediate transport. Jamal's face drained of all color. He backed up against the side of his luxury SUV, holding his trembling hands up defensively. Wait, you do not understand," he stammered, his voice cracking with pure terror. "It was a family arrangement. I am a licensed financial advisor. I did not steal anything. Her mother gave me the documents." The two local police officers moved in instantly, grabbing Jamal by both arms and forcefully spinning him around to face the dark-tinted window of his SUV. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," the officer commanded, kicking Jamal's feet apart to destabilize him. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The sharp metallic click of the steel handcuffs snapping tightly around Jamal's wrists echoed like a gunshot across the driveway. Chelsea completely lost her mind. She let out a blood-curdling scream, lunging toward the officers who were detaining her new husband. "You cannot take him. We just got married. He did not do anything wrong." She grabbed at the local officer's uniform, trying frantically to pry his hands off Jamal. "Ma'am, step back right now, or you will be joining him in the back of the cruiser for assaulting a police officer," the second local cop yelled, physically stepping between Chelsea and the arresting officer. Chelsea collapsed onto the concrete driveway, sobbing hysterically, her expensive designer clothes scraping against the rough pavement. Richard and Patricia watched in absolute paralyzed horror as the officers patted Jamal down, checked the cuffs, and forcefully shoved the supposedly untouchable top-tier financial advisor into the cramped back seat of the local squad car. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing his fate. The life of luxury, the prestigious career, and the arrogant superiority he had paraded around for years were completely annihilated in a matter of minutes. The military police officer walked over to Richard. "You are incredibly lucky the homeowner utilized a standard defensive parry instead of pressing assault charges against you today," the officer warned my father sternly. "If I ever see your vehicle near this residence again, you will be leaving in handcuffs too. Collect your family and vacate the premises immediately." Richard looked like he had aged 10 years in the span of 5 minutes. He could not even look the officer in the eye. He nodded weakly, grabbing Patricia by the arm to pull her toward the driver's side of their blocked vehicle. Before they could climb inside, I stepped down to the bottom of the porch stairs. They both turned to look at me, their faces pale and utterly defeated. They expected me to show some sign of remorse, some hint of the familial loyalty they had exploited for my entire life. I looked right through them. "I told you I am not family," I said, my voice cold and absolute. "Now get off my property." 2 days passed since the police cruisers vanished down my street, taking Jamal and the last shreds of my family's dignity with them. Jamal managed to post bail 48 hours after his humiliating arrest, but walking out of that cold holding cell was not a victory. It was merely the transition from a physical jail into a crushing financial one. The corporate fallout was immediate and absolutely ruthless. My meticulously documented email to his chief compliance officer had worked exactly as I predicted. Wealth management firms survive on spotless reputations, and they absolutely despise federal investigations. The moment the federal authorities reached out to verify Jamal's employment status and access the internal underwriting logs, the firm went into full panic mode. They did not just fire him, they escorted him out of the glass building with private security and publicly distanced themselves from his actions to avoid a catastrophic public relations nightmare. The Financial Industry Regulatory Authority did not wait for a criminal conviction to act. The sheer volume of digital evidence I had provided, combined with the official federal fraud affidavits, triggered an emergency review. FINRA officially stripped his broker licenses, permanently banning him from trading or managing client assets. He was completely radioactive in the financial sector. His prestigious career, his six-figure income, and his arrogant identity were eradicated before the ink on his bail release paperwork was even dry. Meanwhile, the harsh reality of the situation was finally crashing down on Chelsea. She had spent her entire life as the golden child, expecting the world to be handed to her on a silver platter without any resistance. Now she was staring at the absolute destruction of her luxury lifestyle. The bank had not just frozen the mortgage escrow account. Because of the federal wire fraud flags, they had aggressively locked all of Jamal and Chelsea's joint checking and savings accounts pending a comprehensive federal review. They could not access a single dime to save their lives. They could not pay for gas, they could not buy groceries, and they certainly could not afford the exorbitant legal fees required to fight a federal indictment. Chelsea did exactly what she always did when faced with an obstacle she could not charm her way out of. She threw a massive, unhinged tantrum and looked for someone else to foot the bill. She drove straight to my parents' house, marching through their front door with makeup streaming down her face and a furious entitlement burning in her eyes. She did not go there to comfort them. She went there to demand that they pay for a top-tier criminal defense attorney to keep her new husband out of federal prison. The retainer fee alone was $50,000, and Chelsea screamed that Patricia was morally obligated to pay every single cent since she was the one who handed over the stolen Social Security number in the first place. But the civil war raging inside my parents' house was a bitter battle fought over an empty treasury. Patricia and Richard had absolutely nothing left to give her. The severe financial consequences of the ruined wedding reception had already caught up to them with devastating speed. The luxury venue manager had not been bluffing when he threatened legal action over the unpaid catering and open bar tab. When he realized my parents did not have the liquid cash to cover the massive $36,000 bill they tried to fraudulently charge to my canceled card, he went straight to the corporate lawyers representing the exclusive country club. My parents were officially served with a civil lawsuit for theft of services and breach of contract. But it was not just a piece of paper demanding payment. The country club lawyers had filed an emergency motion for a pre-judgment attachment, completely levying my parents' personal bank accounts to secure the disputed debt. Every dollar they had in their checking accounts was frozen by court order. The facade of their wealthy, comfortable suburban life was entirely shattered. Patricia, who had always prided herself on being the most elegant and composed woman in her social circle, was reduced to hyperventilating on her living room sofa as Chelsea stood over her screaming about how her honeymoon was ruined and her husband was going to jail. The walls were closing in on them from every possible angle, leaving them completely trapped in a nightmare of their own making. Chelsea was threatening to entirely cut them out of her life if they did not produce the $50,000 for Jamal's defense attorney by the end of the week. The country club was aggressively pursuing them for the $36,000, threatening to seize their vehicles and garnish any future wages. Their accounts were drained. Their credit was maxed out from years of keeping up appearances, and the social humiliation within their homeowner association was absolute. Neighbors who used to attend Patricia's lavish dinner parties were now eagerly gossiping about the police raid at my house and the impending federal charges against their perfect son-in-law. Richard paced the length of the living room, his heavy hands running through his thinning hair. He had always been a man who believed he could buy or bully his way out of any problem. He could not bully the federal government, and he could not buy a defense attorney with frozen bank accounts. But he absolutely refused to accept defeat. He refused to look his screaming daughter in the eye and admit that they were broke. He stopped pacing and looked around the spacious living room of the sprawling suburban house they had lived in for the past 2 decades. He turned to Patricia and Chelsea, a desperate, frantic look in his eyes. He told them to stop crying. He declared that they still had one massive asset left to leverage, deciding their only option was to take out a second mortgage on their family home. Richard deciding their only option was to take out a second mortgage on their family home felt like a desperate Hail Mary pass. The very next morning, he and Patricia were sitting in the cramped, overly air-conditioned cubicle of a senior loan officer at their local bank branch. They tried their best to dress the part of wealthy suburbanites, merely looking for a strategic financial maneuver. Richard wore his best tailored suit, though it hung slightly loose on his frame from the extreme stress of the past few days. Patricia clutched her expensive designer handbag tightly in her lap, her knuckles white, her forced smile looking more like a painful grimace. They needed $50,000 immediately to secure the defense attorney for Jamal, and they were banking entirely on the accumulated equity of the house they had lived in for over 2 decades. The loan officer, a younger man named David with a crisp blue tie, typed methodically on his mechanical keyboard, pulling up their comprehensive account files. Richard leaned forward, using his most commanding, authoritative voice. He explained that they wanted to execute a standard cash-out refinance on their property. He casually waved his hand in the air, attempting to dismiss any sense of urgency, claiming they simply wanted to free up some liquid capital for an exciting new investment opportunity. He fully expected David to smile, politely nod in deference to their long-standing banking history, and slide the approval paperwork right across the desk. Instead, David stopped typing completely. He pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose and stared closely at the monitor, a look of genuine confusion washing over his face. He clicked his mouse a few more times, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. Richard cleared his throat loudly, annoyance creeping into his tone as he demanded to know what the holdup was. David turned the monitor slightly toward them. "I apologize, Richard," David said cautiously, his professional demeanor tightening. "But there seems to be a significant issue here. I cannot process a cash-out refinance or approve any secondary line of credit for you today. According to the system, you are currently 2 full months behind on your primary mortgage payments." Patricia gasped loudly, her hand flying to her chest as if she had been physically struck. "That is absolutely impossible," she snapped, her refined country club facade cracking instantly. "We have never missed a single mortgage payment in our entire lives. You must be looking at the wrong account. Check it again right now." Richard slammed his heavy hand down on the edge of the laminate desk, leaning in aggressively. He accused the bank of making a catastrophic clerical error. He demanded to speak to the branch manager immediately, loudly insisting that his accounts were in perfect standing. But the truth was an entirely different story. Richard had been quietly moving funds around for months, desperately juggling accounts to keep the illusion of their vast wealth alive while paying for Chelsea's extravagant wedding demands. He had intentionally skipped the mortgage payments, arrogantly assuming he could simply catch up once the wedding was over and the financial dust settled. He had bet the family house on a fake aesthetic, and now the house was calling his massive bluff. David did not flinch at Richard's explosive anger. He simply turned the screen completely around so my parents could see the glaring red numbers on the banking dashboard. "It is not an error," David explained calmly, pointing a pen at the screen. "Your checking and savings accounts were completely levied 2 days ago by a civil court order which drained your liquid reserves. But even before that legal action occurred, the internal system shows 2 consecutive months of non-payment on the primary residential loan." Richard deflated entirely, falling back into his chair as the harsh reality of his hidden financial mismanagement was exposed right in front of his wife. Patricia stared at him in utter horror, her eyes wide as she realized the depth of his lies. But David was not finished delivering catastrophic news. Even if you somehow brought your account current today with a certified cashier's check, I still could not authorize a secondary loan. David continued, his tone shifting from apologetic to strictly bureaucratic. We do not hold the note on your property anymore. Richard blinked slowly, completely caught off guard. What do you mean you do not hold the note? He stammered. I have banked with this specific branch for 20 years. I signed my closing documents in this exact building. David shook his head slightly. Banks frequently bundle and sell residential mortgages on the secondary market to free up capital. It is standard industry practice. According to these federal transfer records, your original mortgage was sold off to a private equity firm exactly 6 months ago. We only act as a payment routing portal now. We have absolutely zero authority to renegotiate terms, approve refinances, or grant payment extensions. Who bought it? Richard demanded, his voice cracking with a sudden intense fear. Who exactly owns the deed to my house? David scrolled down to the very bottom of the digital file. The purchasing entity is listed as a private commercial holding company called Phoenix Holdings, LLC. They assumed total ownership of your debt. If you are 2 months in arrears, you are no longer dealing with our standard banking grace periods. Commercial firms are notoriously aggressive with delinquent accounts. They do not care about your 20-year history with our local branch. You need to contact their legal department immediately, because according to this updated file, they have already initiated the default acceleration protocols. Patricia began to shake uncontrollably. The walls of the tiny bank cubicle felt like they were rapidly closing in to crush her. They had walked into the bank expecting a simple $50,000 lifeline to save Jamal. Instead, they discovered they were completely stripped of their assets, 2 months delinquent, on a loan they could not pay, and their massive family home belonged to a faceless, ruthless corporate entity they knew absolutely nothing about. Phoenix Holdings, LLC was a total ghost. They had no relationship with them, no leverage, and no way to charm their way out of the debt. Richard demanded a phone number, a corporate address, a liaison, anything that would let him negotiate with this unknown company. David printed out a single sheet of paper containing only a generic corporate post office box and a sterile legal department email address, sliding it across the desk. As Richard stared blindly at the useless piece of paper, Patricia's cell phone suddenly vibrated violently inside her designer handbag. The loud, continuous buzzing shattered the tense silence of the cubicle. She pulled the phone out with trembling fingers. The caller ID flashed the name of her next-door neighbor, the notoriously gossipy president of the homeowner association. Patricia answered the call, bringing the phone to her ear, unable to mask the panic on her face. She did not even get the chance to say hello. Patricia, you need to come home right now. The neighbor's voice crackled loudly through the speaker, breathless and dripping with scandalous excitement. There is a man in a cheap gray suit standing on your front porch. He just taped a massive neon green piece of paper directly to your front door, and everyone on the street is outside watching him do it. Patricia dropped her phone into her lap. The blood drained completely from her face. She looked at Richard and repeated the neighbor's frantic words, her voice breaking into a hollow, terrified whisper. Richard did not ask any questions, and he did not say a single word to the loan officer sitting across from them. He simply grabbed Patricia by the arm, pulling her out of the chair and physically dragging her out of the bank cubicle. They practically ran across the asphalt parking lot to their luxury sedan. Richard threw the car into gear and drove like a maniac. He swerved recklessly through the quiet suburban traffic, his knuckles turning pure white as he gripped the leather steering wheel. The silence inside the car was suffocating, heavy with the unspoken realization that their entire world was collapsing. When they finally turned into their exclusive gated community, the terrifying reality of their nightmare was put on full public display. Their perfectly manicured lawn, the absolute pride of Patricia's social existence, was tainted by a massive neon green document taped aggressively to the center of their pristine mahogany front door. The humiliation was absolute. Several neighbors, including the gossiping homeowner association president who had just called, were standing openly at the edges of their driveways. They were pretending to water their flower beds or check their mailboxes, but their eyes were locked entirely on my parents' house, eagerly drinking in the scandalous sight of their financial collapse. For decades, Patricia had ruled this neighborhood with an iron fist, judging everyone else for their lawn maintenance or the cars they drove. Now, she was the spectacle. Richard threw the car into park before it even fully stopped in the driveway. He sprinted up the long brick walkway, tearing the glowing green paper off the door with shaking, desperate hands. Patricia stumbled up the concrete steps right behind him, gasping for air, as if she was physically suffocating. Richard aggressively unfolded the heavy legal document. Printed boldly across the top in stark black ink were the words, "Notice of foreclosure and intent to seize property." The plaintiff listed at the top of the page was Phoenix Holdings, LLC. Richard scanned the dense legal text, his eyes widening in absolute horror as he reached the second paragraph. This was not a standard polite warning letter from a local bank asking them to please catch up on 2 months of missed payments. This was a corporate death sentence. Because they had deliberately stopped paying their mortgage to funnel all their liquid cash into Chelsea's lavish wedding facade, they had triggered a highly aggressive acceleration clause. Richard had arrogantly assumed that, because he had a 20-year history with his local bank branch, a few missed payments would just result in a polite phone call and a small late fee. He never bothered to read the fine print when the loan was sold to the commercial market. The private equity firm was not interested in working out a friendly payment plan or granting a temporary extension. They were demanding the immediate payment of the entire remaining balance of the house. Every single cent of the $600,000 they still owed was due in exactly 30 days. If they failed to produce the total amount by the deadline, Phoenix Holdings, LLC, would execute a forced eviction, seize the property, and immediately auction it off to recover their corporate assets. "We are going to lose the house," Richard whispered, the thick green paper trembling violently in his hands. He looked around at the grand pillars of the porch, the custom landscaping, and the expensive cars in the driveway. "We are going to be living on the street." Patricia collapsed against the wooden doorframe, her designer handbag slipping from her shoulder and spilling its expensive contents onto the porch floor. The sheer magnitude of their complete financial ruin finally broke her. Chelsea's husband was facing federal prison. Their personal bank accounts were entirely frozen by the country club lawyers, and now the very roof over their heads was being ripped away by a faceless corporate entity they could not manipulate or control. Panic consumed her, completely replacing her usual arrogance with raw terror. In a moment of pure, unfiltered desperation, she realized they had absolutely no one else to turn to. Their wealthy friends would never lend them $600,000, especially not after the public scandal of Jamal being arrested in their driveway by military police. There was only one person left on Earth who had a guaranteed government income and a private business. Me. Patricia scrambled on her hands and knees, frantically digging through the spilled lipsticks and credit cards to find her phone. She swallowed every ounce of her pride and her maternal superiority. She remembered mocking my cybersecurity firm, calling it a silly computer hobby, but now she realized that tech company was her only potential lifeline. She dialed my number, fully prepared to beg, to cry, and to promise me the world if it meant I would somehow give them a massive loan to save their house. She pressed the phone to her ear, her breath hitching in her throat as she waited for the familiar ringing tone. She rehearsed her apology in her head, ready to play the victim of a terrible misunderstanding. But the ring never came. Instead, an automated, sterile voice echoed through the phone speaker. "We are sorry, but the number you have reached has been disconnected or is no longer in service. Patricia let out a loud, agonizing wail, dropping the phone onto the concrete porch. I had completely severed the connection. I had changed my number, wiped my digital footprint from their access, and vanished. I was entirely unreachable. As Patricia sobbed uncontrollably into her hands, a white delivery truck pulled up to the curb, parking right in front of the gossiping neighbors. A professional courier stepped out, walking briskly up the driveway, holding a stiff cardboard envelope. He stepped around. Patricia handed the envelope directly to Richard, requested a quick signature on his electronic pad, and walked away without saying a single word. Richard ripped the cardboard envelope open, his hands still shaking from the foreclosure notice. Inside was a formal letter printed on heavy, expensive cardstock. It was from the legal counsel representing Phoenix Holdings LLC. It was not another empty threat or a demand for a phone call. It was a mandatory invitation to a mediation meeting scheduled for the following Monday at a high-end corporate law firm located in downtown Seattle. Richard read the subject line of the letter out loud, his voice completely devoid of hope. To discuss the immediate surrender of the residential property and the legally binding terms of your upcoming eviction. The trap had officially closed, and there was absolutely no way out. By the time Monday morning finally arrived, the grueling psychological toll of the weekend had physically aged my entire family. The mediation meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp at a high-end corporate law firm located in the heart of downtown Seattle. Getting there had been an absolute nightmare for them. With their bank accounts completely levied by the country club lawyers and their credit cards declining everywhere, Richard had been forced to scrounge for loose cash and heavy coins around the house just to pay for the exorbitant downtown parking garage fee. The sheer humiliation of digging through couch cushions to afford parking was a stark, brutal contrast to the arrogant, wealthy facade they had aggressively projected at the wedding venue just a few days prior. The corporate law firm occupied the entire 42nd floor of a gleaming glass skyscraper. The private elevator doors slid open to reveal a sterile, ultra-modern reception area, bathed in cold fluorescent light and decorated with sharp, minimalist artwork. It was an environment designed specifically to intimidate, to project absolute institutional power, and to make whoever walked through the doors feel incredibly small. Patricia, Richard, Chelsea, and a disgraced Jamal were escorted past a maze of busy legal assistants and directed into a massive soundproof conference room with floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the gray Seattle skyline. They took their seats clustered tightly together on one side of a sprawling mahogany table. They looked like absolute ghosts. Patricia had not bothered to visit her hairstylist or apply her expensive cosmetics. Her dark roots were clearly showing, her eyes were bloodshot and puffy from 3 days of nonstop crying, and she wore a plain, oversized gray sweater that seemed to swallow her frail frame. Chelsea sat silently beside her, staring blankly at the polished wood grain of the table. She looked completely hollowed out. Her former arrogant glow and bridal entitlement had been entirely extinguished by the terrifying reality of frozen escrow accounts and an impending, highly publicized divorce. Beside Chelsea sat Jamal. The man who had once worn custom-tailored Italian suits and bragged incessantly about his top-tier financial status was now dressed in off-the-rack khakis and a wrinkled, untucked button-down shirt. He kept his eyes glued to the floor, refusing to look at my parents. The heavy black electronic ankle monitor secured tightly around his left leg by the federal magistrate bulged awkwardly under his pant leg. Every time he shifted his weight in the leather executive chair, the plastic device scraped audibly against the metal leg of the table. It was a constant, humiliating reminder of his looming federal bank fraud trial and the fact that he was forbidden from leaving the state. They had no legal representation of their own. They could not afford to put a lawyer on retainer, leaving them completely defenseless against the corporate machine. The door opened softly, and a sharp-suited corporate attorney walked in carrying a thick leather binder. His nameplate read, Mr. Montgomery. He did not offer a warm smile, he did not introduce himself with friendly small talk, and he certainly did not offer them coffee or water. He simply took his designated seat at the head of the long mahogany table, opened his binder, and laid out the neon green foreclosure documents. He placed a sleek silver pen directly in the center of the table, exactly halfway between himself and my father. Richard could not take the suffocating silence anymore. The man who had spent his entire adult life projecting strength and financial dominance over his family completely broke down. He leaned forward, gripping the edge of the mahogany table so tightly his knuckles turned white, and began to plead. "Please, Mr. Montgomery," Richard begged, his voice cracking with raw, unfiltered desperation. "You have to understand the unprecedented circumstances our family is currently facing. We just need a little more time to liquidate some assets. Give us a 90-day extension on the foreclosure acceleration clause. I can drain my remaining retirement accounts. I can borrow money from some of my old commercial real estate associates. I will find a way to catch up on the arrears. I just need a window of time to untangle this massive financial mess." Richard gestured wildly toward his sobbing wife and his disgraced son-in-law, entirely abandoning his pride. "My family is completely falling apart right in front of me. My daughter was just married last week, and her husband is currently facing a catastrophic legal misunderstanding that requires our immediate financial attention just to keep him out of jail. My wife is suffering from severe clinical anxiety because of this stress. If you enforce this eviction notice today, you are throwing us out onto the street. We will lose everything we have spent 20 years building in that neighborhood. Just give us 90 days. We will sign any promissory note you want. Please, I am begging you, do not take our home." Mr. Montgomery did not blink. He did not show a single ounce of human empathy or professional pity. He sat perfectly still, letting Richard completely exhaust himself. He waited until my father was slumped back in his leather chair, gasping for air and wiping sweat from his forehead. Then the sharp-suited attorney slowly reached out and casually closed his thick leather binder. The heavy thud of the cover hitting the mahogany table echoed loudly in the sterile room, sounding like a judge slamming a wooden gavel. "I appreciate your candor regarding your difficult personal situation," Mr. Montgomery said, his tone as cold and precise as a surgical scalpel. "However, my firm was retained strictly to execute the legal parameters of this defaulted commercial loan. We are a neutral third-party enforcement entity. I am not a loan officer, and I absolutely do not have the authority to restructure corporate debt, negotiate new payment plans, or grant any 90-day extensions." Richard stared at him, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. "But you are their legal representation," Richard stammered frantically, pointing at the closed binder. "You have to have some level of discretionary power. Who do we need to talk to? Give me the phone number for the corporate board of directors. Let me speak to the specific asset manager in charge of our portfolio. I am a reasonable businessman, and I know I can make them understand our situation if I just get 5 minutes to explain." Mr. Montgomery folded his hands, neatly resting them on top of his closed binder. "Phoenix Holdings, LLC, is not run by a corporate board of directors," he clarified smoothly, his eyes scanning the desperate faces of my family. "It is a privately held limited liability corporation managed entirely by a single executive officer. The sole authority to halt an eviction grant, a financial extension, or reverse a foreclosure acceleration clause rests entirely with the chief executive officer. You will have to ask the CEO of Phoenix Holdings directly if you wish to plead your case." Patricia leaned forward, a tiny, pathetic glimmer of hope suddenly igniting in her bloodshot eyes. "Then please call them right now," she pleaded, wiping a tear from her cheek with a trembling hand. "Put them on the conference speakerphone. We will beg them if we have to. Please tell the CEO we are sitting right here and we are ready to negotiate." Mr. Montgomery did not reach for the sleek black conference phone sitting in the middle of the table. Instead, he looked right past my family, shifting his gaze directly toward the back of the room. He gave a sharp, highly respectful nod. At that exact moment, the heavy oak doors of the conference room clicked open. Every single head in the room swiveled frantically toward the entrance, expecting to see a ruthless, gray-haired corporate executive or a calculating hedge fund manager ready to dictate the final terms of their financial ruin. They were bracing themselves for a stranger who held the absolute power to throw them out onto the street. Instead, I stepped through the doorway. I was not wearing my military fatigues, and I was certainly not wearing the casual jeans and plain sweater I had on when they ambushed my front porch days earlier. I was dressed in an immaculate, custom-tailored Tom Ford suit in a deep, intimidating shade of charcoal gray. The cut was razor-sharp, projecting absolute authority, immense wealth, and meticulous control. My hair was pulled back into a sleek, flawless knot, and my posture was the very definition of military precision blended seamlessly with corporate dominance. I did not rush. I walked into the room with slow, deliberate steps, my designer heels clicking sharply against the polished hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the sterile room like a metronome counting down the final agonizing seconds of their arrogant, entitled lives. Mr. Montgomery immediately stood up from his chair, buttoning his suit jacket in a display of profound professional respect. He stepped aside gracefully, pulling out the heavy leather executive chair at the very head of the long mahogany table. I walked past my completely frozen family, took the seat of power, and smoothed the lapels of my jacket. The reaction from the opposite side of the table was instantaneous and intensely visceral. Patricia let out a loud, ragged gasp, her hands flying up to cover her mouth as if she had just seen a ghost materialize right in front of her. Her eyes widened to the point of bulging. Jamal went completely pale, his skin turning a sickly ashen shade of gray. He shrank back into his chair, the heavy plastic of his federal ankle monitor scraping loudly against the metal table leg once again, as he tried to physically distance himself from my gaze. Chelsea simply stared, her mouth hanging slightly open, her brain entirely unable to process the visual information in front of her. Richard was the first to somehow find his voice, though it lacked any of its usual booming patriarchal authority. "What are you doing here?" he stammered, his eyes darting frantically between me and the sharp-suited lawyer standing beside me. "Riley, this is a highly private mediation meeting regarding a commercial foreclosure. You cannot just barge in here to gloat about our current situation. We are dealing with serious corporate matters that do not concern you. Mr. Montgomery, I demand you have building security remove her from this room immediately so we can finally speak with the CEO." Mr. Montgomery remained standing perfectly still, his hands clasped respectfully in front of him. He looked down at my father with a completely blank, unforgiving expression. "Richard," he said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion, "may I formally introduce you to the sole owner and chief executive officer of Phoenix Holdings, LLC." The silence that violently crashed down on the conference room was absolute. It was so heavy and suffocating that I could clearly hear the faint hum of the air conditioning vents in the ceiling and the rapid, shallow, panicked breathing of my mother sitting halfway down the table. Richard stared at me, his eyes completely unblinking. The color drained from his face so fast, I thought he might actually suffer a medical emergency right there in the leather chair. He opened his mouth to speak, but absolutely no words came out. He looked at Mr. Montgomery, then back at me, his mind completely short-circuiting as the impossible, terrifying reality slowly settled over him. His daughter was the corporate entity holding the executioner's axe over his head. I did not immediately speak to them. I let them drown in the silence. I leaned forward, reaching for the heavy crystal water pitcher resting gracefully in the center of the polished table. I picked up a thick glass tumbler and poured myself a drink. The sound of the ice clinking sharply against the crystal was the only noise permitted in the room. I took a slow, deliberate sip of the cold water, setting the glass down onto a leather coaster. I took my time, letting the sheer, undeniable weight of my presence crush the last remaining fragments of their lifelong superiority. "You always loved to mock my career choices, Richard," I began, my voice calm, steady, and projecting effortlessly across the expanse of the long table. "For years, you and Patricia told everyone in your elite social circle that I was throwing my life away. You said I was wasting my potential by enlisting in the military. You called my private tech consulting business a silly little computer hobby that would never amount to anything real. You genuinely believed that because I did not go to a prestigious law school or marry a fraudulent wealth manager like Jamal, I was the absolute failure of the family. Patricia let out a quiet, trembling sob, completely unable to tear her eyes away from the custom suit and the sheer financial power radiating from my side of the table. While you were busy maxing out joint credit cards to maintain the illusion of vast wealth and paying for luxury weddings you absolutely could not afford, I was silently building an empire. I continued my gaze sweeping over each of their defeated faces. My little computer hobby is a highly classified cybersecurity firm. I hold exclusive multi-million-dollar defense contracts with the Department of Defense and several top-tier international banking institutions. I make more liquid capital in a single financial quarter than Jamal made in his entire fraudulent career. And because I needed a secure, diversified way to manage my personal wealth and my commercial real estate investments, I created Phoenix Holdings, LLC. Chelsea shook her head in frantic, desperate denial. No, she whispered, tears spilling over her eyelashes and ruining her leftover makeup. This cannot be real. You cannot be the one doing this to us. You are my sister. I ignored her entirely, keeping my focus locked intensely on Richard. 6 months ago, my automated financial algorithms flagged your primary residential mortgage as a high-risk asset. I explained, laying out the precise timeline of their financial ruin. I saw the late payments piling up. I saw the massive debt-to-income ratio you were desperately trying to hide from your country club friends. I knew you were secretly drowning Richard, so I instructed my asset management team to quietly purchase your mortgage from the secondary market. I absorbed your massive debt. Richard swallowed hard, his hands trembling violently on the table. You bought the house? He whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. You bought our debt to save us. I leaned back in the heavy leather executive chair, resting my arms casually on the armrests, looking at the people who had treated me like garbage for 2 decades. I bought your mortgage 6 months ago as a favor, I stated coldly, letting the words hang in the air like a final judgment. I fully intended to restructure your debt, significantly lower your interest rate, and quietly give you the financial safety net you were far too arrogant to ever ask for. I was fully prepared to bail you out of your own mess. But then I attended a wedding where I was told I wasn't family. The words hung in the sterile air of the conference room, heavy and absolute. I watched the realization slowly crush the last remaining fragments of their pride. They had pushed me away when they thought I was beneath them, and now they were discovering that I was the only floor keeping them from a total freefall. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. My calm, calculated tone was far more destructive than any screaming match we had ever had during my miserable childhood. For my entire life, I had to sit quietly while this family paraded around like suburban royalty, I said, pulling a stack of crisp, neatly organized documents from my briefcase. Richard, you walked around the country club giving financial advice, acting like a titan of industry, while secretly skipping mortgage payments just to keep up appearances. Chelsea, you demanded a $36,000 wedding reception and a first-class honeymoon to Bora Bora, while your husband funded your entire luxury aesthetic with a stolen social security number. You all looked down on me because I chose service and hard work over your toxic country club charade. You thought you were so much smarter than me. I slid the first document across the polished wood. It stopped exactly in front of Jamal. He stared down at the paper as if it were a live grenade. What is this? He whispered, his voice trembling so violently he could barely form the words. That is a copy of your impending federal indictment, I replied smoothly, leaning back in my chair. You are looking at multiple counts of identity theft, bank fraud, and wire fraud against a cleared military officer. The mandatory minimums for those federal charges will guarantee you spend the next several years in a federal penitentiary. Your broker license is permanently revoked. Your prestigious corporate career is completely obliterated. You are never bouncing back from this, Jamal. Jamal closed his eyes, a single tear escaping and rolling down his ashen cheek. He pushed the paper away, completely broken. I pulled the second document from the stack and slid it down the table. It came to a rest right in front of Chelsea. She flinched, refusing to look at it, keeping her eyes squeezed shut. "Read it." "Chelsea," I commanded softly. She slowly opened her eyes and looked down at the official legal notice. It was a formal declaration of seizure for the $750,000 luxury home she had been flaunting on social media for the past 14 months. "Because your husband secured that mortgage using my stolen identity, the asset is legally compromised," I explained, watching the devastation wash over her face. "The bank has officially accelerated the loan due to the federal fraud investigation. Since you have absolutely no liquid assets to cover the balance, the property is being seized. You are going to be evicted by the end of the week. You have no house, no money, and a disgraced husband going straight to federal prison." Chelsea buried her face in her hands and began to sob uncontrollably. It was not the fake manipulative crying she usually used to get her way. These were the guttural, agonizing sounds of someone watching their entire existence burn to the ground right before their very eyes. I turned my attention to Patricia. She was already weeping, her shoulders shaking under her oversized sweater. The elegant, composed matriarch, who had barred me from the wedding venue, was completely gone. In her place was a terrified, desperate woman who finally realized that her golden child was ruined and her scapegoat was holding all the cards. "Riley, please," Patricia sobbed, reaching her trembling hands across the mahogany table toward me. "Please do not do this. I know we made mistakes. I know we treated you poorly. But we are still your family. I am your own mother. You cannot throw your own father and mother out onto the street. We will do anything you want. Just please give us the 90 days. Remember the woman who raised you. Please, I am begging you, have some mercy on us." She cried real tears, but they were not tears of genuine remorse for how she had treated me. They were tears of pure self-preservation. She was only sorry that she had been caught, and she was terrified of facing the consequences of her own horrific actions. I looked at her outstretched hands, remembering all the times I had reached out to her for maternal support, only to be slapped away or criticized. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering sense of familial obligation. Just total, liberating indifference. I slowly stood up from the heavy leather executive chair. I buttoned my custom suit jacket, my movements perfectly composed and unhurried. I picked up my briefcase and looked down the length of the table at the pathetic ruins of my former family. "You made the rules at the wedding door, Patricia," I said, my voice ringing with finality in the quiet conference room. "I am just enforcing them." Richard stared at me, his mouth agape, completely paralyzed by fear, with my authority as the chief executive officer of Phoenix Holdings. "I am formally denying your request for a 90-day extension," I stated clearly, ensuring every word was permanently etched into their memories. "You have exactly 30 days to vacate my property. If you try to damage the house, or if you take so much as a single light bulb when you leave, I will have my lawyers press felony charges for theft and destruction of corporate property." I turned away from the table and walked toward the heavy oak doors. Mr. Montgomery quickly opened the door for me, his expression perfectly neutral. I stepped out of the sterile conference room, leaving Patricia, Richard, Chelsea, and Jamal sitting in absolute stunned silence, surrounded by the undeniable legal proof of their complete and utter ruin. Walking down that quiet, carpeted hallway felt like exhaling a breath I had been holding in for 26 years. I did not look back through the glass walls. I did not wait to hear if they would start screaming or crying. I simply took the private elevator down to the lobby, stepped out into the crisp Seattle air, and walked away. The war was officially over, and the fallout was absolute. Flash forward 2 months. The federal justice system is notoriously slow, but when you hand prosecutors a neatly organized encrypted hard drive containing irrefutable digital evidence and a crystal-clear video confession, they move with terrifying efficiency. Jamal did not even attempt to take his case to a jury trial. His expensive court-appointed public defender took one look at the security footage and strongly advised him to take a plea deal. He is currently serving a mandatory 3-year sentence in a federal penitentiary. The arrogant man who used to wear custom Italian suits and threaten my military career over the phone now wears a standard-issue khaki jumpsuit. His days of managing elite wealth portfolios and flying first class are permanently over. Now he manages the prison laundry schedule and earns pennies an hour. He will be a convicted felon for the rest of his life, permanently barred from ever stepping foot inside a financial institution again. Chelsea experienced an equally brutal reality check. When the bank aggressively seized her $750,000 luxury house, she was given exactly 48 hours to pack her personal belongings and vacate the premises. Without Jamal's fraudulent income, and with her own complete lack of marketable skills or savings, her spectacular fall from grace was devastating. She is currently living in a cramped, poorly insulated studio apartment situated directly above a noisy laundromat. To make rent, the former golden child who demanded a lavish country club wedding is now working a minimum wage retail job at a discount department store. I heard through the extended family grapevine that she spends her 30-minute lunch breaks crying in the stockroom, entirely unable to cope with the harsh reality of folding clearance rack sweaters for women who make more money than her. Her fairy tale life turned out to be a poorly constructed lie, and now she is paying the ultimate price for her entitlement. As for Richard and Patricia, their eviction was the grand finale of their social demise. True to my word, I gave them exactly 30 days to pack up their lives and vacate my property. On the final day of their eviction, I hired a strict private security detail to oversee their departure, ensuring they did not damage the walls or take a single fixture that belonged to the estate. It was a humiliating public spectacle. The same homeowner association neighbors who used to attend Patricia's lavish dinner parties stood openly on their manicured lawns, watching in hushed, judgmental silence as my parents loaded their belongings into a cheap, rented moving truck. Because their bank accounts remained levied by the country club lawyers to pay off the massive wedding debt, they had absolutely no financial safety net. They were forced to move into a tiny, dilapidated trailer park on the far outskirts of town. Their new neighbors are not corporate executives or golf club presidents. The wealthy socialites who used to kiss Patricia's cheek at charity galas have completely shunned them, blocking their phone numbers and pretending they do not exist. They are isolated, financially ruined, and living in the exact kind of poverty they used to viciously mock. I, on the other hand, am sitting in a comfortable armchair on the expansive wraparound porch of the property I just seized, my childhood home. For years, this sprawling suburban house was a fortress of impossible expectations, emotional coldness, and constant belittlement. Every room held a toxic memory of Patricia telling me I was not good enough, or Richard ignoring my achievements to blindly praise Chelsea. But today, the air feels entirely different. The house is currently filled with the loud, echoing sounds of a professional construction crew. I am completely gutting the interior. The formal dining room where they used to host their pretentious parties is being torn down to the wooden studs. Patricia's pristine, customized kitchen has been demolished. I am systematically stripping away every single toxic memory, every layer of expensive wallpaper she chose, every brass fixture she touched. I am renovating the entire estate from the ground up to serve as the new, highly secured headquarters for Phoenix Holdings and my cybersecurity firm. The exact place where I was made to feel the smallest, the most insignificant, is now the physical concrete foundation of my expanding corporate empire. The sun is beginning to set over the quiet suburban neighborhood, casting a warm golden glow across the newly manicured lawn. The heavy construction noise fades as the workers pack up their tools for the evening, leaving me in absolute peaceful silence. I take a slow, satisfying sip of my black coffee, looking out at the horizon. I survived their cruelty, I outsmarted their greed, and I built a life they can no longer touch. Blood might make you related, but loyalty makes you family. If someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to protect your peace? Tell me your story in the comments below.